is real. Listen.
Hi, I'm Traci.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is Curious Explorers. Hey, Kath.
Hey, Trace.
How's it going?
It's going. It's going because I woke up this morning and it was well and truly Halloween season. The weather has turned,
best season.
The leaves have turned, everything's going.
Only one I'm really interested in. I'm going to be honest.
Yep. Yeah.
People can at me in the comments.
Yeah. We got 3 months of Halloween. Yay.
I know. And I have on my witch's shirt. I have to order some more Halloween apparel.
I have my shirt too. Yes, exactly. Right on cue.
I'm going to get one. I have to go up there and get one.
Yes, you have
Zelda,
to go there.
Right on cue, is barking.
Zelda's a really good dog name, but Zelda's also a really good witch name.
Yes. I had not thought of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, good to see you. You saw the Hoppie story.
I did.
I don't know. I think I only briefly referred to the Lake Hopatcong monster as Hoppie.
Right.
But the story is made up.
The narrative is made up. Right.
Yes. The story I told is made up, but the Hoppie legend it's a real legend. Yeah, so Kathy, because you are actually a New Jersey native, I'm assuming that you were already familiar with Hoppie. Mm-hmm. And we did kind of give Hoppie a little shout out during our live thing at Paranormal back in May.
Right.
When we talked about cryptids. But are you familiar with any of the myths or actual sightings of something in Lake Hopatcong?
So, like many paranormalists, my interest was in like cycles or stages. I did have a long and deep cryptid era, where cryptids were really big to me.
As one does.
As one does, as one is wont to do.
Of course you did.
And I still do. I still find cryptids to be really interesting because they so perfectly kind of straddle that space between utter manufacturing or complete folklore and science and scientifically proven or empirically proven phenomena. And because, there should be, if something exists, ultimately there is going to be evidence of it. So I am familiar with Hoppie, specifically with Lake Hopatcong. I am familiar with stories. I had friends growing up who would go to Lake Hopatcong as their kind of summer vacation or go to camp there. So they would share with me their stories. And because I did such deep research into the Jersey Devil, I did research Lenape legends as well. And Lenape culture has references to various lake monsters, but specifically sea serpent in Lake Hopatcong. So I am familiar with that.
For people who didn't catch the last episode and don't know that we've been doing a little scary story series where we're doing a kind of shorter scary story, a narrative that we have created about something that is a real legend. Last week was about the monster purported to be in Lake Hopatcong, and definitely it took some real artistic license there. But there is thought to be some sort of gigantic sea monster in the lake. There have been a variety of sightings throughout the last 150 years-ish of things that people have attributed to either an anaconda or a sea monster.
Yeah, plesiosaur, some kind of. So I mean, a lot of the theories are. So, like, we look at this and we say, well, the last 150 years or the last 200 years, because that's when Western Europeans are there. And
True.
Those are the stories that we take as being like valid and worthy of, well, that's an eyewitness. But
they hit
exactly. But there are thousands of years of folkloric and oral tradition, specifically related to the Delaware Indians or the Lenape Indians. And we do tend to look at these things and say, well, native cultures looked at this spiritually or symbolically and it meant X, Y, and Z, as opposed to there's a breeding population of a, empirically proven creature to exist When in truth, as you and I know, it could be both. It could be both a spiritual being and a physical, that has physical manifestation, and one doesn't negate the other. It could be the big. If you think of Hoppie and you think of it as New Jersey's Loch Ness monster, that'll
Yeah.
give you a really good idea of what we're talking about. So they all have very similar descriptions of, they have a head like a horse or a head like a goat that
Or a
rises
dog.
up, or a dog, and usually what they're describing is something with a snout, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about, something that has a bit of a snout. So it doesn't literally look like a dog. But it looks like a dog in the shape of the head, and that's to differentiate it from, say, something like a walrus or something like a sturgeon that would be long and large but wouldn't have a face that didn't look like a fish. So they're really saying like it's not a
Right.
fish. That's essentially what they're
Right.
saying. It's like doesn't look like a fish, because sturgeons can get to be 30, 40 feet long.
Good Lord.
Yeah, and which would be
And
terrifying too.
it's so interesting too, because it's as far as I would imagine a body of fresh water, it is a very large lake.
Right. It is a very
It was
large
a
lake. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it is.
it's a complete aside, but I'm gonna make you laugh 'cause I have many hangups. Not gonna lie. I would say I'm a somewhat neurotic person.
You?
Still in the realm of
What?
normal neurotic, but that's
Stop
probably a
it.
broad range. I know. So,
Stop it.
I don't I'm not someone who ever wants to go in a lake. I don't even really go in the
It
ocean at this
almost
point.
sounds
Like
like Dr. Seuss, like a Seussical. You know what I mean? Not
I
not
will
in a
not go in
puddle,
a
not in a
lake.
lake. I will not. I will not
For
stay.
goodness sake.
I will not stay awake while riding in a lake. For goodness sake.
Yeah,
I
oh
get it
my
though.
god.
I get it. I get it.
So my father went through this phase. So my parents, this is a real tangent, but both grew up in New York City in one of the boroughs. My father grew up in Queens, my mother grew up in Brooklyn, and it is a million years ago. So when we moved as a family to Central Jersey many years ago, my father tried to embrace, his version of living in the country.
Yeah.
It's a suburb, but for
Yeah.
them it was like moving to the sticks.
Yeah.
And he got a secondhand boat, like a small sailboat, and he would try and, like, get us to go out on the sailboat with him. He went through his sailing phase. So, I must have been, like, 10 or 11, and he'd try and get me or my brother or, like, I'd get to take a friend from school, shout out to Linda, and we would go to, like, Round Valley Reservoir or Lake Hopatcong.
Mhm.
And I think my aunt and uncle, that's a whole other story, got dragged along for one thing, but it wasn't a giant thing. And, he would dock the boat and we would jump into the lake. But to be completely honest, like a lake is a little bit of a terrifying thing to jump into because it's deep, you're not seeing the
Mhm.
bottom. There's a certain murky element, especially in the warmer weather. I'm getting all like agitated talking about it. But had I heard about the Hoppy myth then,
Mhm.
I would have been clinging. My father probably would have pushed me over the side to try and get me to enjoy the lake, air quotes, and I would have been clinging for dear life to the side because I already had my own anxiety, life jacket or not. So about lake water, it's just like a thing that's a little overwhelming for some people like myself. But anyway, had I known about the Hoppy myth, there is zero chance. I'd have been like, you could ground me for life. I'm not going on the boat in that lake.
You know what? You know what's I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I know I
No,
jumped
go
in
ahead.
there.
No, go
No,
ahead.
I
No,
mean,
it's good. Better
I
to stop talking about
I
it.
do I get it. I get it, especially because it's completely contained. You know what I mean? It's not like the ocean where you're like, no, there's sea monsters here, and you're like, yeah, but it's a massive space. What are the odds? And but when it's a lake, it's like it being in your pool. Where it's like, well, eventually it's going
Now
to
I'll be
get
afraid of
me.
pools.
But do you know what I mean? Like, eventually
Yeah.
it's going to be in this area. And I grew up, it's so funny when you were describing that. I was like, all I kept hearing was like, Green Acres is the place for me. Like you guys are like going out to where the bumpkins are. I will say this: we were the bumpkins, right? We were the bumpkins. But we used to go up to Lake Hopatcong, and it was like a big deal to go. It was a big, big deal to go. And I grew up, my parents were off the boat Irish. So off the boat Irish cannot swim. I will say, until the last generation, I don't think I knew one Irish person that could swim. And,
That
which
is
is,
hilarious.
yeah, it's hilarious because they're on an island. And when I was
But the
growing up,
water's
uh,
cold
but no, but they would
and
all
rough.
drown. They would just drown. Like
Oh my
I had
god.
never been to Ireland as a youth where there wasn't a story where it was like, well, then he drowned, because they would go
Oh my
fishing.
god.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. They would go fishing in these hip waders, and the water would fill up the hip waders, and they would drown. It was terrible. But we would go to Lake Hopatcong, and I remember being the thing that always got me about Lake Hopatcong was they had those floating docks for like they weren't that far out, but if you could swim, you could go out and hang out on it. Maybe there would be a lifeguard there, but it was like it just gave you the idea of how big this lake, because I think the lake is like 4 miles, like 4 square miles. Like, it's a big space.
It felt so vast.
It's so vast. And listen, if you're in Michigan, we get it. Like, we get it. You have real lakes. We understand.
For
But
New
this is
Jersey.
but this is New Jersey, okay? And this was shocking to us. And New Jersey has
My parents
beautiful.
went from concrete
Yes,
to
that's
Lake
it.
Hopatcong.
That's
Very
it
overwhelming.
was like, listen, we were lucky we were able to pronounce it correctly. Like, up here, it's funny that you say that because, I'm not a sun person, but every place I live is
No.
right by the beach, right? But up here in Cape Cod, all summer I was going to the beach, not to go to the beach, but because people were with me, and it would be like, okay, let's go to the beach. And they would go in, and the ocean has always been absolutely mesmerizing to me, but also absolutely terrifying. It's like the waves, they get you. And I'm not a
Yeah.
swimmer. I'm sure I could float. If I could think to float, I could float. But I am not I'm not surviving if I have to do that. You know what I mean? I know that I'm not. So the ocean's always terrifying to me. And when my nephews, who are like, daredevils, when they go out, I'm always terrified. And up here they're known for sharks, so that's an additional thing, right? But it's always the
Oh my
water.
god.
But I found out that there are these ponds up here. And these ponds are like these beautiful, tranquil, but they're lakes. They're lakes. They're big glacial lakes. But I will say, I prefer that because I'm like, it's at least the tide is not going to drag me out. At least I'm not going to. However, if I learned that there was, a giant surf, I don't know. I might go just because of
Oh.
that. But I mean, I will say though, the one thing about Lake Hopatcong, about Hoppie, I don't know of any stories of any kind of like the thing about sea monsters versus other cryptids is they just seem to exist. They don't seem to have any kind of like plot or any kind of like angry interaction with humanity. Whereas like El Chupacabra or like the Mothman or even the Jersey Devil, there seems to be this kind of like conflict. And sea monsters don't seem to have that. I
Well,
don't know that well, except in your story.
in my story,
Mm.
100%, but I
Mm.
wanna just read you a few quick things because I was looking and I was trying to figure out, like, well, myths don't arise for no reason. I was trying to see what had been documented,
Right.
so I'm gonna relay a few things. And I'm gonna give a shout out to Mary Sparago in New Jersey Digest. This came out a few years ago, but basically she did some digging. So I'm just gonna go according to the timeline, but basically 1879 is actually, I think, the first time that this was reported in local newspapers and maybe even a national one. The Sandy Hook Life Saving Service was cruising along familiar waters just off the coast of Sandy Hook Shore and traveling by boat. The service team was completing their rounds and ensuring the community was safe. And then they had this sighting,
Right.
right? So the whole community was in an uproar. And then in the 1890s, late 1880s, early 1890s, there were more sightings and,
But that's
the
Seabright, right?
things.
That's Sandy Hook. That's not Lake
No, that's
Hopatcong.
oh, sorry.
Oh no, I think it's good to show that there are like listen, if it's there's one in Lake Hopatcong and then you find out there's one in a bunch of lakes, it's hey, maybe there's some kind of underground, like
Yeah.
with Loch Ness,
So I'm
they
gonna
think there's some kind of
yes.
underground tunnel.
So, yeah. So I'm just gonna clarify that. So, they suddenly stopped the people in the Sandy Hook Life Saving Service because they noticed something, quote, horrifying and large in the water, and they returned to shore explaining their findings. And what they said was that they saw a 50-foot long serpentine creature that rose from the water near their boat. They said that Sandy Hook creature, which is not Lake Hopatcong, you're right, that's Jersey Shore, had two horns above its head poking out above large eyes. I'm assuming if you're 50 feet long, it makes sense that you'd have very large eyes and everything else.
Right.
But this is where they said it was bulldog like. And they said it slithered to the front of the boat and gave a loud roar. Now, even if they were drinking, and I'm not saying they were, they probably weren't. But I don't think that collectively your mind would create that. So I guess the reports were considered really credible. They were detailed. And in fact, at that time, a scientific research team was dispatched to investigate the whole thing. Later, I guess researchers determined that the monster, I don't know how you determine it that many years later, but was a giant squid, which to me would look very different from what they described. But there were other sightings along the shore around that time in the 1880s. But I guess in Lake Hopatcong, I guess a fisherman was cruising along, doing what fishermen do. And he said at the time that a large creature slithered over the water, like on top of the water, toward the back of his boat. And he rushed the boat to shore and told everybody, but his description of the creature matched other people's descriptions. And again, this time 40 foot with the head of a Burmese dog and the body of a snake. He said the monster had a black body with a dirty white underbelly. And then the same day, another boater in Lake Hopatcong supposedly encountered the same creature, and he fired his rifle at the serpent's head. Again, this is according to that article, but his 38 caliber bullet bounced off the creature's head. And it says, much to his dismay. I'm sure that doesn't quite capture it. And he said that the serpent even winked at him after deflecting the attack. So now maybe he did have a
Yeah,
beverage
maybe
or
had
two.
a
I don't know.
few. You know what I was
I don't know.
funny about those though? It's like I shot at it and I hit it, but it bounced off, as opposed to you missed. Like
I don't. I
it's there's so many stories where people have shot at things and they're like, no, I
maybe it
hit
did
it. I
bounce off.
totry hit it, but it didn't,
It
or
was
it
pretty
bounced off.
close range, though, if you think about it, and the thing was so big that if these guys are used to, I don't know,
I don't know. I just
carrying
think if
some
you
heat,
have this
back in some
thing,
heat, as they say.
if this you have, first of all, you're on a boat, right? So the likelihood that you have your
Okay.
rifle ready to go, right? You have, oh shit,
Couldn't tell
something's
you.
coming. But I doubt it's cocked and loaded and ready for you, right? And then this thing is swiveling at
Couldn't
you.
tell you.
I just think it's unlikely. Now, does that mean
Kathy,
it's
are you saying that as a person who typically takes a fishing boat out with a rifle in it?
well,
Because
I've been on lots of
you're like,
fishing
"Yes."
boats. No, no, I mean
You're like, "Yes, I
I've been
do."
on fishing boats. But what I'm saying is the likelihood of you being like it takes a second to get your gun, get it set up, a moving target that's moving at you.
Your boat's rocking.
I'm not saying that he didn't shoot it. I'm just saying I'm not sure it bounced off. You know, I'm not sure the
You're
bullet
like, "It
bounced off.
perhaps
It might have missed.
perhaps it's
Yeah,
just a miss."
maybe it's a miss. Look,
Hard to tell it.
I'm not. You know what? I wasn't there. Just saying, maybe it was a miss. That's all. Maybe you missed.
But that's he told his wife he definitely hit it.
Oh yeah, I definitely hit it.
Um,
I definitely hit
hit it was the
yeah.
bullet bounced
Oh, the
off.
bullet bounced. I saw it bounce. It totally
But
bounced.
this made local news in the Lake Hopatcong Angler and also the New York World. This was August of 1894.
Right.
So this was a somewhat huge story for the day. So then all of these locals, which I think is hilarious, flooded the region trying to, I guess, get a sighting. But, there's also this Hoppie panic, this
Right.
widespread Jersey Hoppie panic. And of course, everybody's debating, is it a dog? Is it a serpent? Is it a turtle? Which to me seems like a stretch. Somebody said it could be a beer keg. Also seems like a stretch, but maybe not. I don't know. Eels. But then in 2014, quite a bit
Quite a
later,
bit
I'm
later.
assuming there were sightings in the interim. Maybe they didn't make the news. I don't know. But it said sudden panic befell New Jersey. So there was a new report of a serpent-like creature swimming around Lake Hopatcong once again. Now, if it's the same creature, it would be quite elderly,
Hmm.
probably less of a threat. However, if it is not the same creature, we should assume there's more than one,
Breeding
right?
population.
So we don't know, but
Unless it's
I'm just thinking
supernatural.
yeah, unless we can apply
Hmm.
normal biological
Although
rules.
sharks,
I know.
supposedly sharks can live to whales and sharks can live to be hundreds of years old, maybe.
Yeah, who knows? But I guess more than one local spotted this creature. More terrifying
Did
stories
anyone who
surface.
wasn't local spot the creature?
I think you have to be close to the lake to spot it,
Well, the reason
unless it
why
teleports.
listen,
Sorry.
I don't want to be too pragmatic here, but it does sound like really good marketing. Yeah, and it does sound like things are getting quiet in the area, and we had a couple of
We should see if
sightings.
there was a
And
dip in tourism
no,
right before.
seriously, the reason why
No,
I say
really.
that is right at that time period, right roughly from about the mid 1880s. And again, I'm a person who believes this stuff, right? So
All
I'm
right.
not
You're like, I'm
criti-
sold.
yeah, no, I'm not critical of this of it in general. I'm just saying when you have stories like this that are very very similar to other stories, and then they kind of disappear for a long period of time from the mid 1880s until like the 19 teens, there was a lot of stuff that was reported, and it really, they were hoaxes. They were created because you had this time period where people suddenly had leisure, and they would day travel to do certain things. And you also had regional newspapers as opposed to very very hyper local newspapers. So you had things like the Giant, and you had like, and especially things that could be tied to any kind of indigenous folklore. So you had people who were becoming more educated as to folklore and things like that, that had a little bit of discretionary income. And you had communities that were interested in capitalizing on that. And so you might have someone who said, no, I definitely saw something weird in the lake. And then the conversation was like, well, was it 50 feet long? Are you sure it was only 15 feet long? Maybe it was 50 feet long. And, you kind of had,
Do you want to buy this Hoppie
yeah,
keychain?
or
We've got a Hoppie cocktail special on Fridays.
taverns stayed open and things like that. So we have a tendency to think of that as purely a modern kind of thing, but it's not. It definitely was happening. Honestly, it was happening from the 1830s on. You really did have tourism from the 1830s and stuff like that, but specifically in the upstate New York and the northern New Jersey area, you had a lot of things that were happening in that time period. And again, I am a person who is all in on lake monsters. I love a good lake monster. I'm just
If you're not in the
saying.
lake.
Yeah, exactly. Although, like I said, they don't seem to attack, except unless you're armed with a rifle, and rubber bullets that bounce off their heads. Um,
100%. I find it very interesting, and there could be plenty of things we don't know about. There might be some actual. I think every once in a while, a new real animal
oh
is
yeah. Well, like the giant
discovered,
squid. You
so
talked about the giant squid. I mean, the reason why, like, the giant squid was considered to be a mythological creature. The first actual recorded evidence of a giant squid, despite centuries of sailors talking about it, and just casual evidence or not empirical evidence. The first was, I think, 2015 was the first recording that we had of an actual giant squid, because they don't surface. So the reason why the giant squid was believed to exist was because they found these giant whales, these massive whale carcasses that had sucker marks on the side of them. And so
oh,
they thought, well, what could injure an animal of this size? And the only thing that they could come up with was that it had to be a squid that it fought with, but that squid would have to be so large. But there was no evidence, there was no actual forensic evidence of a giant squid until they actually, a Japanese, I think a drilling operation, had cameras down deep and saw and actually caught a giant squid on video. So the idea that, you know,
I would have hightailed it out of there.
well, I don't think I was unmanned, but I think that the idea that there
I
are,
hope so.
because it's so deep, it's so far down,
Yeah,
but the idea that there are these animals that we don't know. Of course, there are probably thousands of animals that we're not aware of. I think when it comes to
right.
something like a lake monster, because it's fully contained, you think to yourself, well, yes, this is a big lake, but it's not an ocean. There's also the spiritual component to it, where like if you look at what the Lenape culture said, was they looked at these sea serpents as essentially nature spirits. So they weren't only physical, they were also there as kind of guardians of the natural elements. So there's another component to it that's not purely cryptozoological, but it's also spiritual.
So interesting. There was a little bit more that I wanted to share with you because, again, we doubt things that are so far in the distant past, understandably, but supposedly in 2014, this is the last example I'm going to share with you. But again, the story started resurfacing, and all the stories fascinated a reptile specialist and zoologist. I might mispronounce his name. Apologies in advance. It looks like Gerald Andrijak, but if you've heard of him, let me know. It wouldn't even surprise me, Kathy. But it
Oh,
basically,
Jerry? Oh, Jerry? Oh, yeah, I know Jerry.
my buddy Jerry, I'm going to have
Oh,
the Hoppie
oh, yeah.
cocktail with him
Oh, yeah,
after.
totally Jerry. I know Jerry. I do not.
But I guess he set out to discover what this creature was, and this is where we would differ, Jerry and I, but he waded into the waters, eventually stumbling upon, but not catching, the elusive culprit. I don't even know if this is really the culprit, but it certainly would be enough to stop the search for most people. Understatement. He found a 16-foot green anaconda was wading in the shallows. Now, I don't think somebody would confuses 16-foot anaconda with a 50-foot lake monster with the head of a dog or whatever. But the reptile remains in the waters. I guess they didn't remove it. And, we can think of all kinds of ways it could have gotten there. It certainly wouldn't be native to the area. But the specialists explain that anacondas can be aggressive and grow. This is terrifying. Never, ever going in lake water again anywhere. But they can grow up to 26 feet and weigh 550 pounds.
Yeah.
And again, if somebody dumped their pet anaconda, or if it got loose or whatever, or more than one got loose or whatever, could that explain somebody feeling like something this is giving me the heebie-jeebies, but like the grabbing you as you're swimming, or something brushing against you, or seeing something slithering through the water and the reflection making it look even bigger? I mean, those are all possible explanations. I don't feel like I'm gonna solve this.
Yeah, I do have to say, so it is interesting. Like when you look at Loch Ness, they have a pretty good idea what they think the Loch Ness monster could be if we were looking at something in the fossil record, and it's like a plesiosaur. So it's
Looks like a
actually,
dinosaur.
yeah, and so it's like the head rises up, but there's a larger body. And in Ireland, there's a bunch of lake monsters, and Scotland has a bunch of lake monsters, and all of Western Europe has a bunch of lake monsters. And if you start getting into Eastern Europe and Northern Europe and stuff like that, they do too. They have different types, right? So as you're getting into like Finland and Iceland and all of those, they're much more sea serpenty than they are. That you don't see them rising up the way you do in like Ireland or Scotland or England or in the United States. But like Lake Champlain would have a very similar champ, is a very similar lake monster to Lake Hopatcong. It's interesting because so is the sea bright, or the Sandy Hook sea monster that you talk about. But 50 feet is a big animal. It, and I do think
Ooh,
people don't, they're not great at measurements, But I think that if you're on a ship, right, and you're used to being on a ship, and your or a boat, and your boat is a 25-foot boat, right? If something
Yeah,
is,
you could
like, yeah, it's
probably estimate pretty
twice the
well.
size, it's twice the size. What is interesting to me is the idea that the things rear up their heads, which means they have
Hmm.
incredibly powerful bodies. And to me, sounds like there might be something other than just snakes can do that, but they do that, not for a very long period of time. But when you're talking about something that's like holding its head up and turning around and looking at you and opening its mouth and all of those things. It sounds like there's more of a
And
body
bulletproof.
underneath that. Yeah, and yeah, well, at least bullet repellent, at very, very least. I don't know. I would say though, it does seem weird to me that at a lake like Lake Hopatcong that it wouldn't be seen more. There's a
I don't
lot of people
know.
around Lake Hopatcong there, and it's not that big of a lake. Like when you look at Loch Ness is a, you know, Loch Ness it's like 900 feet deep. It is a massive lake. But that being said, you know, who knows? And like Loch Ness was like the Loch Ness monster was actually seen leaving the lake and crossing a road, like walking across a road.
Are you
So who's to
serious?
say? Yeah. So who's to say that you're not
There aren't
talking
little
about
feet.
something that's amphibious? Like if it's a dinosaur, it gets up and it leaves, and maybe it goes someplace else. And I don't know. I do love these stories because I think that they kind of keep the wonder, in the world, and the possibilities that, just
That is the
because
nicest way to say it.
yeah, well, just because, I mean, if it's an animal, it's obviously not evil, right? It doesn't mean you want to run into it, but like a grizzly bear is not evil. It's just
No, yeah,
terrifying. It's just
100%.
it's just
Yeah.
terrifying. But if it's something more than that, then there's something really exciting about that, especially if it is a dinosaur, especially if it is some kind of a callback or a throwback, that like a one-off that survived or something. I find
And
that's
make
exciting to me.
Yeah, it's enough to make me think I should move back to Brooklyn and a lot of concrete.
You're gonna have to move to the Midwest. If you
Yeah,
move,
so there
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's
no
gotta be
lakes.
lakes there too,
Yeah, you're
obviously.
like this.
Yeah, no,
No lakes. Zelda
so
gets
I
very
don't wanna do it either.
frustrated. Yeah.
Can you come here?
Zelda's like, I
It's
am
not real.
not
It's not
moving
it's
to the
not real, Zelda,
Midwest.
it's a myth.
It's the Wendigo. Zelda is terrified of the
Come
Wendigo.
here. Anyway, perhaps that's a good place to
Yes.
stop and ask our listeners to let us know what you think. Is Hoppie real? Have you had a sighting? Have you sighted any other lake or sea monsters? And what do you want to hear more from us?
Yeah, I would love to hear stories that you guys have. That would be great.
Absolutely. Kath, it was great to see
It
you.
was good to see you too, Trace.
And obviously, dear listeners, until next time, stay curious.
Keep exploring.
Bye for now.
I
Bye.
know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
You've just listened to the Curious Explorers podcast with the Kathy Kelly and Tracy Stein. If you enjoyed the episode, remember to like, share, follow, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. And of course, until next time, stay curious.
The paranormal is real. It is real. The paranormal is real. Is it? The paranormal is real. It is real.